Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to round 3 coverage of the U.S. Chess Championships taking place in St. Louis, Missouri. For round 3 I selected the game Alexander Onischuk against Alexander Lenderman to take a look at. Onischuk, I mentioned in round 2's video when showing his game against Ray Robson, where Robson scored a nice win, that he had contended many times for the U.S. Championship, but I didn't know if he had ever won it. Well, it turns out he had. He won in 2006, and also that he finished among the top 3 7 times, including that time in 2006. So a perennial contender, and he did make it to the top once back in 2006. So strong player, as well as a chess coach. He coaches the Texas Tech University chess team. So he's facing a younger player again, another young challenger in Alexander Lenderman. Let's see how he handles it. He starts off with d4. After d5, c4, Lenderman plays c6, the Slav defense. And Onischuk goes his own way pretty early. The most common move here, and maybe the best really, is knight to c3. But he plays e3, a very early e3, and this allows bishop f5. And I think this is interesting because normally this early bishop f5 is not so good because it's met by queen b3. But in those positions, the knight is already on c3, whereas here it's not, and it makes a big difference. And we'll see why in just a few moves. So Onischuk takes, Lenderman takes back. And then Onischuk plays queen to b3 with a double attack, attacking the b pawn and attacking the d pawn, which is the drawback of this early bishop deployment. But Lenderman has a good move here with queen to c7, and this move is in a counterattack. It's attacking the bishop, which is loose on the back rank, and something that's easy to overlook in a blitz game. So pay attention if you happen to play like this to those loose pieces on the back rank. And so now Onischuk plays knight to c3, but this gives Lenderman time to defend the pawn with e6. But if we back up a couple of moves, if you could imagine in this position that instead of the pawn on e3 we had the knight on c3, then this white would be picking up a pawn here, or black would have to play some. Yeah, if the knight is on c3, there's already a double attack on that pawn and an attack on that pawn. So I think this bishop f5 move would not have been playable in that case. But because of e3 here instead of knight c3, black has this counterattacking move, and now after knight c3 can defend the center. So black has had a successful opening. I would say black is probably equalized already. He's got the Slav bishop outside the pawn chain without having to give up the center. Usually black has to play d takes c4 in order to get this bishop out the pawn chain, outside the pawn chain without trouble. So here he's managed to do it. Well, it's only about even. It's not like it's an advantage for black, and it's a long game. So knight f3, knight c6, we just get some normal developing moves. And now knight h4, starting to ask this bishop where it wants to go. The bishop goes to e4. And then let's see, the bishop could have dropped back to g6. So Lenderman is choosing to place it here. I don't know if f3 is any good here, trying to kick that bishop back. That's sometimes an idea, but this knight is close to being stranded, so it's a little bit of trouble here. F3, would take away that retreat square for the knight. So anyway, Onischuk continues developing with bishop d2, and Alex plays bishop e7, and now Onischuk decides to take off that bishop with knight takes e4, d takes e4, and it looks like this is a problem at first. This knight no longer has a square to go to. These squares are all taken, and it's under fire. And you don't really want to play a move like g3 and allow black to take and mess up the pawn structure over here on the king side. But it looks like Onischuk has this all planned out, because he played the really interesting move d5, and this is the move that I really like in this game. d5. It gives up a pawn. That pawn is just a goner, and black stays up a pawn for quite a while. but it really frees white's position. If we look at the position here, things look about even if we ignore the tactics over here against the knight. Just looking at sort of overall the development and center control and things like that. You know, white's got 2 pieces and a queen out, and so does black. White is still 2 moves away from castling, and so is black. Just needs to develop the knight and castle. So very even position here. And then we'll compare this to the position a few moves later after d5. Now, of course, this is a counterattack. I suppose it's possible to take over here, take the knight, and allow white to take this knight over here. But Lenderman chose just to grab the pawn. And the idea of this pawn sacrifice is now there's a square for this knight to go to. The knight can hop to f5. You know, perhaps Lenderman thought he would get some mileage out of chasing this knight around, but the knight goes to d4, which is a good square. Although it can be chased away from there. There's still ideas for black in this position, like putting the bishop on this diagonal, you know, pressuring that center. So slight improvement to white's position, but black got a whole pawn. But, well, the game continued. He played queen to d7 here, and now bishop to b5, pinning that knight, and bishop to f6, piling up on this knight. Now bishop c3 was played there, and now the move king to f8. So Lenderman has the idea of bringing his king over here to castle by hand, as it were. Use the king to defend the bishop, and then maybe develop the knight and solve all of his problems. And white castles. And so this is the position I wanted to compare, because in this position now white has solved all his development problems. He's castled, he's got all his pieces out, and black's position looks like a mess, right? The knight is still undeveloped. The king is sitting here on f8, and so it all comes from this this pawn sacrifice, this move d5. If we compare these two positions, this one looking about even, and this one where black is a pawn up, but white has this tremendous edge in development. So if you can find these kind of pawn sacrifices in your own game, definitely you should look at it. Okay, so king to g7 was played. By the way, the chess engine thinks all of this is in the range of about even. It even likes black in certain cases. So it's not like Lenderman has played badly here, but well, his position is still a little bit awkward. He's paying a price for holding on to that pawn. I guess that's the way to look at it. So Onischuk goes about undermining the center with f3. We get knight takes d4, e takes d4, taking with the pawn, not trading more pieces, but keeping the bishop pair. The queen goes to d6, getting away from the bishop. Yeah, I should have pointed out this is a clever unpinning maneuver, because when knight takes, it hits the queen. So both queens are hanging at this point. But after this exchange, then black's queen has to move. Okay, now f takes e4 was played. Cancel that. Yeah, it's white's turn. F takes e4 and d takes e4. Now rook to e1, hitting this pawn. And Alex played rook to c8. And this is actually the first real mistake in the game. Rook to c8, and the advantage starts to swing in favor of white. But I just wanted to point out some things about this position. It's really pretty tricky. So, for example, if black was, say, thinking, I'll give that pawn back, but I just want to complete my development, and plays a developing move like knight to h6. This loses right away to the move. Oh, well, let's not give the answer away here. Why don't you see if you can spot the tactic? Okay, pause the video if you want some time to look at it. What Onischuk could play here, what white could play, is rook takes f6. And if the king takes, then pushing the pawn forward with this check along that diagonal forces the king out in the open, and there's a winning attack. And if the queen takes, similarly, that pawn coming forward wins the queen. So actually, there's no good reply after rook takes f6. So the knight has to stay back there defending the bishop. The best try here, according to the chess engine, is to play the move a6, kicking the bishop. And then, this is complicated. It looks like this also gives material back, and it also potentially weakens the king side. For example, one line is bishop to c4, and then after b5, bishop takes f7. This is a chess engine line, and it evaluates this to 0, 0, 0. So, well, black can get the pawn, stay a pawn ahead by playing bishop takes here. Bishop takes, queen takes. This comes with check. But, you know, his king side has become open, and anyway, the chess engine evaluates that out to 0, 0, 0, so there's probably some drawing lines there. The way for white to keep fighting, and not settle for a draw, but try and play for the advantage, is to play bishop to e2. So it's not so much material comes off. b5 can be played here, and then rook f2, preparing to double, get some pressure here, and then queen to e6, trying to trade queens and relieve some of the pressure that way. And the game would continue, and this is maybe with a slight edge to white. Black's still a pawn up, and still under pressure, but looks like a playable position for black. After rook to c8, Onischuk just grabs the pawn, and now the material is even, and white has a number of advantages. He has the bishop pair, he has the safer king, although it is still a little bit exposed on the diagonal. There's always tricks on d4. But the main problem is black's development here and the awkward placement of his pieces on the king side. Let's see, black plays rook c7 here. Bishop to b4 was played, kicking the queen. Now bishop takes d4 check, kicking the king back. Black is momentarily a pawn up, but actually this doesn't last. There is, let's see, plays queen to b6 here, counter-attacking this bishop, and, well, it's still defending this bishop over here. And there's one, actually, Onischuk plays a nice move here, but there's actually a killer move in this position, and one that's hard to find, so I can't, I can't say that you should find this upon inspection. But if you want to look for a killer move for white here, see if you can spot the idea. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. Yeah, pause the video if you want some time to think about it. It's a pretty interesting puzzle. The amazing move, well, Onischuk didn't play this either, but there's an amazing move here, rook to e6, just putting that rook there on a square where it can be taken in two different ways, and it's a winning move. So first of all, if pawn takes, then bishop here is checkmate. The rook defending the bishop, and the bishop covering all those squares. The king has nowhere to run. So that's the idea. And there's the same problem if queen takes. If queen takes, then you just trade queens, and then you mate again. And lastly, if queen takes the bishop here, then bishop to f8 directly, check, is winning the queen. So yeah, there's just no good move here for black. Black is completely busted after rook to e6. Well, Onischuk played an interesting move. He sacrifices the exchange here on d4. It's just a temporary sacrifice, but of course you have to calculate all this and make sure there's no gotchas in there. White can't, or black can't take the bishop and just trade bishops because of bishop f8 check again. So, but black takes the exchange here, and then white gets the exchange back right away with this move bishop to c3. It's a skewer of the queen on the king, and so black has to give the exchange back to survive that. Bishop takes c3. And now this is, I guess, the point at the end of it. At the moment it looks like white is still a pawn down, but the queen is under attack, and white's queen and rook are coordinating on f7, so he's going to get the material back. So the queen went to d6 here, and now queen takes f7 with check. Yeah, not just getting the material back, but driving the king to an awkward square. So once again, white has achieved material equality, but with a great attacking position. He could just continue here with queen takes b7 and go up in material. He played in a somewhat slower fashion. He chases a king around a little bit. There may be an issue of getting to the time control, So simplifying by getting the queens off, and then the king comes back hitting the rook, but he was probably confident he could win this endgame. The rook comes over here to b8, hitting the rook, hitting the pawn, and then rook b7 check. King goes to h6, and rook to f7, g5. Yeah, I'm not going to comment on these moves. There's just a lot of, I think they were just playing quickly to get to the time control, really. But, well, there are threats. This g5 opens up this coordination of the bishop and the rook here. That's defended, but it keeps black all tied up trying to hold on to things. Let's see, g4 was played, king to g1, king to g5, so the king is getting out of trouble that way. Offering that pawn up, I guess. Rook to f8 was played, keeping this knight under lock and key. And now there's a threat of bishop here winning the knight. So the king runs back to defend. Rook to a8. a5 was played. Rook to b8. So just a lot of shuffling. The king goes back to g7 to defend things. Now there's a couple of checks. Check here, king to f8, check back. And king goes to g7. And the purpose of this is that after this check, the king goes back to f8, and then he plays rook takes f6 finally. And the reason for that is that now we're on move 41, so we made the time control, and he's now a pawn up in this endgame, and this lets the knight out of jail. He probably didn't want to do that until he had time to think about all of the consequences here. Once this knight starts to get active, you know, then things can happen, and if you're low on time, you don't want to have to deal with that. But he just goes for the bishop versus knight endgame here with rook b8 check. King d7, takes, and now bishop to e4. Let's see, let's just cancel that. Let's just step through this. Bishop to e4, it's pretty routine win in the endgame, king to f2. Both sides are moving their kings towards the center. White grabs another pawn. I was probably hanging there for a while, and holds on to all of his pawns. And at this point, right here, after this move, bishop to e4, Lenderman resigned. So anyway, a nice win for Onischuk. Some interesting tactics there. Let's check out the standings. So on the women's side, there's 3 players with 2 wins and a draw, 2.5 points each. The leaders are Tatev Abrahamyan, Carissa Yip, and Nazi Paikidze. Irina Krush, the pre-tournament favorite, is at 2 points. And in fact, she barely escaped with a draw. I think Tatev Abrahamyan, or no, she was playing Alyssa Melakina today. And Alyssa had a winning position at one point, but wasn't able to convert it. So Irina Krush escaped and is still in contention there, just half a point behind the leader. And Anna Zatonsk, the other pre-tournament favorite, is at 1.5 points, so 1 point back. But it's early going, and we will see how they do. And then on the men's side, let's take a look. We have, let's look at the cross table. In the lead, we have Fabiano Caruana, Wesley So, and Ray Robson, all with 2.5 points each. So they're showing their class. And Hikaru Nakamura, another pre-tournament favorite, is a half point back, along with Sam Shanklin. And then Alexander Onischuk, with that win, got up to 1.5 points, along with Jeff Zhang. And then at 1 point, we have Gadakamsky, Alexander Shabalov. And at half a point, we have Akshat Chandra, Viruzhan Akobian, and Alexander Lenderman. So Akshat Chandra did get on the board, so everybody has at least half a point in this tournament. And 8 rounds to go. So interesting games coming up, I'm sure, and I will see you later. Bye.